Welcome to React.js. This is Vivian Arana, and today we will look at how to fetch data using useEffect. In this particular class, what we're going to do is we are going to get JSON data from a particular API and display it using useEffect. Now, how do we do this? We can use it using a fetch function that is available. So, first, I have a project available here, but where do we get the data from? So, I'm going to use Reddit. Sure, you're familiar with this. And inside Reddit, you have all these different user tags, which is like, let's say this group are funny. And if you want to get JSON data from here, I can just do .json and it will give me JSON data for that particular page. Similarly, if I go to some other website, other group, for example here, and it will, same thing I'll have to do here, just change to .json and I'll have that available for me. So I can get all my information from here, all this data from here, and then try to build a website from this data. That is one way of creating your website. So I'm going to do is take this data and I'll show you how to fetch it from there. So we'll create a function, call it Reddit data. So this will be our component, and this is what I will be using here, data. Just run it, and since this needs to return something, I'm just gonna return loading for now, but so that's what it shows. Now if I want to fetch data, I'll use the fetch function, and I'm going to use that URL. Go back to the, so I have the URL here. Once I have the URL, I will do then where I'm going to take the response that I get and send it to response JSON. Next, I'm going to save the data somewhere. So I'm going to create a state variable, constant data, set data function equal to use state, and for the data I'm going to use null to initialize it and it properly. And once I have this, now next here I'm going to call set data to set the data that I get from here, and then finally I'll write catch. In case if there is an error, I want to just print that error out. Console.error is good enough. So that extra bracket over there, so I removed that, and that fixed the problem. So I have this now, it's fetching this data, but how do I use it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use useEffect, and inside this I'm going to write all this code. So I have this code here. Let me format this. Once I have this, next step is returning this data, or returning back the data that I have here. So I'm going to check here, if data exists, then return this, else return nothing. So if there's data, I will say return a div, and inside this div, let's get the JSON. So let's say JSON dot stringify my data. That's what I will return back. And if you see, my entire JSON is displayed here. Now what if I want to display, so if you see it's constantly changing because they're probably adding different data as and when we are talking, and it's updating that. So what if I want to change this, display this in a nicer format? So what I'm going to do is just format this properly, and here I want to display whatever data I get. And inside this data, if you look at the data set that I have, if I want to display the title in here, let's go to title, let's go to the second one here. So data, inside the data I have title here, so that's inside data, and inside the data I have children and the first object. So I don't want to map through it, but I'm going to do data children, and I want the first. Let's take the second object because first one doesn't look to have a title, and inside that I have data, inside that I have title. So if I save this, did I really just do that? And that's where I get from this title here. Now I want to display an image too. So you see it has a thumbnail image. So what I'm going to do is use this thumbnail inside an image tag. So I'm going to say image src equal to, this is where my source is. If I save this, the error that we have is must be wrapped. So I'm gonna add a React fragment here, and if you see, I have my image here. If I change this to next parameter, let's see if it has an image and a title. It does have one. So if you see, this is how you can do that. But what if I want to change this? So I can always say that I want to have, let's say, the group name, want to make it more dynamic, and that group will come from here, and say group equal to, let's say, funny. Then the data will come from there. In this case probably there was no image, so I'm just going to change that back to the one that we had before. So the reason it didn't work here is because I didn't add a dollar sign here. Once I do that, I have this. So if you see this, as soon as we add this here, it's working fine. It's fetching the data and displaying. So you can use similarly, if you have the API available, you can use that, fetch the data, and then display it in the way that you want. So that's how you can use fetch in using useEffect to fetch data and then display it on your website.